Okay, I guess we will go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining. I appreciate you being here. I sort of appreciate your sense of adventure. I came to realize that the app didn't actually have a description of my talk, so you're kind of here completely blind as to what I might be talking about. So I appreciate your willingness to jump into the unknown. I am Alan Zimmerman. I am a senior business process architect for a company called Travelport. I'm responsible for implementing process and quality improvement efforts basically throughout the company. About 20 years of total experience doing quality and process kinds of work, 5 of those now with Travelport. So you probably haven't heard of Travelport, but there's a good chance you used us to get here to Miami, actually. So we are a travel commerce platform. We do about $83 billion of travel transactions a year. And our role in that is to take all of that content from over 400 airlines globally, hundreds of thousands of hotels around the globe, car companies, cruise lines. We gather all of that data, aggregate that all, sort it all, prioritize it all, and provide it to online websites like Priceline.com or cheapair.com or those kinds of sites, or the corporate travel agent that you may have used to book your trip here to Miami, so that you have the most relevant choices and the best options available to you when you are making your decisions as to how to travel to wherever you're trying to go. So you may have used us. Thank you for your business, whether you knew you were using us or not. I appreciate that. So let's see, what am I going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about our use of Bizagi and our pilot process for fixing our API enablement process. Obviously, when you're doing 1 trillion transactions a year like we do, it's really important to have good API connections with your partner companies and customers. So, the API connections are really important to us. And our process for enabling customers with API connections was broken. It was taking us way too long to get those things enabled for folks, taking weeks often to get these things completed. We had inadequate upfront edits, so you get the garbage in, garbage out stuff going on, things having to get rejected back to the originator to fix their original request. We had almost no parallel processing going on in our process. Everything was just kind of linear, which adds excess time as well when you're waiting for things you don't have to be waiting for. And the result of that was we had significant lost revenue. If you're doing 1 trillion transactions, right, we got about $6.70 almost per booking done on our transactions, right? And if you delay a Priceline or somebody like that, even a few days, that's a lot of potential bookings that you're losing out on, right? So it was significant lost revenue for us and led to a lot of unhappy stakeholders, both internally and externally. So we needed to fix that. So what were our objectives in doing so? Well, we obviously wanted to fix that process, right? We wanted to get to the point that we were enabling these API connections a lot faster and a whole lot more efficiently than we had been before. But beyond that, we wanted to expand our capacity to do process improvement and become more agile with our process improvement capabilities and to shorten the cycle times that we had for doing process improvement generally, above and beyond just trying to fix this particular process. So what was our approach for doing this? Well, a couple of things that were important here. First of all, you need to have a process focus. Try to maintain a process focus when you're trying to do process improvement, not an organizational or group or departmental focus. And I can see a couple of you nodding your head because this is actually harder than it seems, right? Sometimes your process improvement efforts are actually owned by a particular group or kind of dominated by a particular group, right? So if you have a billing group that's particularly involved in this, the billing aspects of this process are going to be great. Gosh, it's going to work great for the billing folks. The ordering people are going to have to go through all sorts of shenanigans to accommodate billing, and the finance people are going to have to jump through hoops and do all this extra stuff to accommodate billing. But the billing stuff is great, right? You've optimized your piece part at the expense of the whole. So we try to make sure that we're always keeping an entire process view of things and minimize the kind of dominating influence of one particular group that's involved in the process improvement effort. As part of that, then, we need to have collaborative teams, right? And have a cross-functional team that represents all of the stakeholder groups, trying to give everybody a representative voice in the process of improving things, to minimize that one group optimizing their piece at the expense of the whole, but also just to make sure that you're getting everybody's input. So collaborative, cross-functional teams focused on the particular goal for that process. And then, a low-code approach, fast, easy-to-use approach, so that we can move quickly and do things, right? The other thing you need to do when you're doing process improvement is to graph your as-is process first. I learned this lesson the hard way multiple times, thinking that I understood it well enough that we could skip this step. But always, 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 without exception, graph your as-is process first. So when you do that, you will discover things, right? There will be inputs and outputs that you didn't know you had, some of which might be important, some of which aren't, but you need to know they're there and why they're there. You'll have stakeholder groups you didn't know were involved that you need to get involved. And when you draw it out, you may discover that you have a pile of spaghetti, like that diagram at the top, right? So just try to do some process analysis and maintenance on that. If I change that notify sales activity, well, which of those downstream activities might be affected by that, right? You'd be a long time just figuring out what the impacts of your proposed change might be, no less actually making the change. So, when you get your pile of spaghetti like that, then you know that you need to try to simplify things and make things more linear, right? Obviously not trying to get to a single sequential line. You want to have parallel processing and, decision gateways to route off to various options, but try to get rid of the spaghetti to the extent that you can. Just a note about Agile. Spent a lot of time talking about Agile at this conference. So you can't run a train at different speeds, right? So Agile started in the software development methodology, right? In the software world, and the IT departments deployed that, and bless their hearts, it was a great advancement. But you have to have your whole organization running agilely if you're really going to get maximum effect out of this. And I think Bizagi really helps with this, right? Because Bizagi is a tie to the business side, and yet you can run really quick, do short iterations, test it, deploy it, see how you think of it, make short-term improvements, all the things that fit into an agile development methodology. Agile allows you to do, and to help bring along that business side and make the ties to the business side so that your whole organization is being agile rather than just your IT groups. So I think that's really important. What were we looking for when we were looking for a tool? Well, obviously we were looking for something that was really easy to use. The less time I spend fighting with the Bizagi tool or whatever tool I'm using, the faster we can implement, right? So we were looking for ease of use. Now we did bring in InnoVelocity for a couple of weeks. One of the vendors out here, they came in for a couple of weeks to help us with this. Kind of taught me some of the finer points of using Bizagi and best practices and some of that. And I would recommend that as a getting started approach. But to a great extent, I had gone out to the website and just taught myself how to use Bizagi. And I thought it was really easy to use, and that's why we chose this tool. And for our initial pilot project, it was just me. I was the only person doing Bizagi. I had a programmer that was helping with building the interfaces and server maintenance and that stuff. He was given less than 10% of his time probably, but it was just me. So it needed to be easy. I'm not a programmer, and I could quickly deploy things at that point. A low-code approach contributes to that speed as well. So less than 10% of our total effort was doing code. Most of it was in studio, building forms, designing the process, that kind of stuff. And if you're not writing code, you can increase your speed too. And thirdly, we wanted to improve our front end in order to improve our bottom line. So if you've got better edits and better controls up front, you get less garbage into the heart of your system. You're going to have better outputs, which results in better profits and better outcomes for the stakeholders and the shareholders, right? So improve your front end to improve your bottom line. And obviously, I really like the Bizagi editing capabilities out of the box, drag and drop kind of stuff. So what were our results? We have 12 performer groups in this API enablement process. Billing and contracting and various groups, 12 of them overall, 96 tasks. Anybody else have an activity that's up, or excuse me, a single process that's got up around 100 activities or more? Yeah, I didn't figure there'd be very many, a couple hands up, but yeah, I'm not proud of that number. I'm not proud of that number at all. I'll talk a little bit in a minute about why it is that. There are 430 data elements in the process, which kind of indicates the complexities and some of the variations and things in there. Though probably 50 of those are obsolete now, but yeah. So we've got a large, complex process. Again, it was just me, and it took me about 5 months to get through all of that, working with all those stakeholder groups, doing all the screen design, going out to all those groups. Do you like the screen? What edits do you need? Is there additional data? It took about 5 months from when we signed the contract to when we actually deployed our first process. So what happened when we deployed that? Well, we now process about 70% of our requests in a single day. That's literally triple the 23% that we used to have. So we tripled the percentage of our requests that are completed in a single day. and we had a 75% improvement in our overall cycle time. So that was big for us. Again, I mentioned if you delay somebody like a Priceline or a major corporate travel agency even a few days in expanding their business, that's a lot of revenue out of our pocket. So we got a lot of additional revenue out of the deal, so much so that we got positive payback in 2 months. So I think our business case said we'd get positive payback within a year, but we got positive payback in a single 2 months, paying for the entire Bizagi license, my time, all of the costs associated with it. So it was a really big hitter for us from that regard. Really happy with it from the dollars and cents and numerical kinds of aspects. But we also loved it from the feedback we got from the users. So we do business in about 170 countries around the world. Bizagi is used worldwide. Anybody else have a Bizagi case that came from Somalia? All right. I'm the only Somali service provider here, so I've had, I don't know, three or four orders that came from our Somalia contractor. So we are literally all over the world. My favorite one there is Cassandra's, the third one down there. It's kind of scary. It's pretty fast, right? So she was used to her request taking a week or 2 or 3, right? And she gets it the next day, and she's like, something was missed. Something's wrong here. This isn't going to work. I'm afraid to give this to my customer, right? So those kind of backhanded compliments, if you will, are, that's a sign that you hit it out of the park, right? You've really exceeded their expectations when they're scared that it didn't work, right? So those kinds of things helped us confirm, along with the numerics and the dollars and cents and things, that we had a big hit on our hands. So what were some of our lessons learned here? Well, so I reconfirmed the mover's mantra. If in doubt, throw it out, right? If you're moving and can't decide whether you want to pack something or not, toss it, right? So do the same with your process, right? If there's a step in your process that you're in doubt about whether it's adding value or not, toss it, right? So make sure that you're focused on high-value work. Get rid of your low-value work. A couple of examples we had. In our old as-is process, we had a gatekeeper role. And part of the gatekeeper role was to be a human editor, because we didn't have good upfront edits, so that part was moving into Bizagi. And part of their role was to funnel it to the right department at the right time, which obviously Bizagi was going to do. But there were some other functions that people are like, well, we still need the gatekeeper because of this or because of that. And I was just never convinced that there was high value left in that gatekeeper role, so we eliminated it. No more gatekeeper. We had a document called a link cap document. Went out to dozens of people, this email distribution list. All these people got the link cap. And I talked to several of them. Why do you need the link cap? What do you do with it? I could never find a valuable reason for the link cap. So we eliminated it. I got 2 emails a week or so later. Hey, I noticed my inbox isn't filled with all these link caps anymore. What's up with that? Oh, we eliminated the link cap. Do you need it? Because we can start producing it again if you have a need for it. No reply, right? So we didn't actually need the link cap. We filled up everybody's emails with the stuff that they didn't really need. So eliminate your low-value work if you can. Staff appropriately. I mentioned it was just me and Tom, my programmer, with less than 10% of his time. Now I'm kind of proud of that, frankly, for the pilot project that we were able to do so lean, and I think that's a big kudo to how easy Bizagi is to use, that I, as a beginner, was able to do this. But once we got past that, well, we needed to staff up, right? Because I needed to be moving on to bringing on additional processes and doing additional stuff. And I was still with the, we have a product change, we need to accommodate our process, and we have, some edits that have been suggested, and we've got some problems that we need to go figure out. And that low-level operational, tactical implementation kind of detail, I was spending all my time in, right? So we needed to staff up. Finally, here within the last 6 months or so, I have some help now, and I was pleased that I didn't have to stand up in the team of 1 to 3 people when they were asking that yesterday, because we now have 4 people helping me out with that. So that's nice. Think strategically as well as tactically. That ties into that, right? So I'm a senior business process architect. I'm supposed to be thinking strategically, right, about how to do process improvement to maximize the effect on the bottom line, right? So I need to get back up to doing that strategic stuff and doing my strategic networking with the leaders around the company to say, what's a broken process that's hurting your area? What can we do to help, right? So make sure you have a good balance of strategic thinking on your process improvement team, as well as that tactical low-level detail. okay? Really important. And then pick a big problem to start with. Dean Leffenwell, with his Scaled Agile, talks about this too, right? When he's putting in his Scaled Agile process, he wants that to go into the biggest, worst performing IT group you've got in your organization. Because if Scaled Agile will work there, it's going to work everywhere, right? And of course, you're going to have all that political exposure. If here's the biggest, hairiest, politically visible mess you've got, you cleaned it up. Now you've got, great visibility and great support going forward. Right? Oftentimes people say, well, this is just a pilot, it's a proof of concept. I'm going to start with this simple little thing because, we're just proving it in. What have you proven? Right? There were 50 things that could have solved that simple little thing. Right? All you've proven is that this is one of multitudes of things that could solve this little thing. What you want to know is if Bizagi or whatever tool you're accepting is going to fix your big, hairy problem. The reason you're trying to make the improvement is to fix a big, hairy problem. So don't try to prove that by fixing something small, right, and easy. You're going to sign a contract for something that doesn't really meet your needs in the longer term, right? So start with something big and politically important and highly visible, and that way it will work for you, and you'll get all the political support. Hey, if you can fix that, go for it. I've got lots of money for you to go do other things, right? And then I love the quote from Jack Welch there. If the rate of change on the outside exceeds the rate of change on the inside, the end is near, right? I think Bizagi really helps with this because now you can help, do faster, more agile process improvements and really help your business move at the speed of the market and hopefully keep the end from being too near for your career and your company. Okay, things I might do differently if I were going to start from scratch. First of all, I would be more careful with my data model. I mentioned 430 data elements in my data model. The first version, I actually worked with a data architect, and he did a third normal form database design for me. It was beautiful. There was probably, 230, 250 elements in it at that time, something like that. But then it became mine to maintain, and we're now at 430 data elements. And I'm sorry that my data modeling skills aren't all that great. So some of the, bringing on these additional people, it's like, sorry, Jacob, I don't really know where that data element is hiding. We're going to have to go search, right? Because my data model is not as good as it should be, and it costs us in terms of, taking longer to find things and just make it more difficult to do that maintenance. So I'd be more careful with my data model if I had it to do over again. Swim lanes. I mentioned that we have 96 activities, and swim lanes tie into this. So when we first did our first deployment of the model, we had, the traditional swim lanes by stakeholder group, by performer group, right? So here's the enablement team, here's the technical support team, here's the billing team, right? Had that laid out organizationally, 12 different stakeholder groups. So you come to a parallel process, and the gateway has 3 different activities after it, right? So you've got one up in the top swim lane, and one in the bottom swim lane, and one in the 7th swim lane, and they're immersion and doing things afterwards, and trying to scroll up and down, it was impossible to follow. Right? Our users couldn't see what was going to happen with their request. So we dumped that, and we went to swim lanes by request type. So now we have a swim lane for a new API, a swim lane for a deinstall, swim lane for add service, add capacity. Right? So we did a swim lane by request type. That was great from a user's perspective, because now they could see that, okay, I'm on a new API request. Here are the activities, and it's a pretty complicated flow within there, but at least, a comprehensible, viewable version of that process going through the new activity swim lane. The con of that is I ended up with duplicate activities within that process. Right? The new API process ends with a provide credentials activity. The add services process ends with an add credentials activity, almost identical. Same for the add capacity, right? So there's various activities of the capacity review, capacity planning step happens multiple places. Pretty much identical activities that I had to duplicate in multiple places in my process, which is part of why we ended up with that 96 activities in our total process. So we're thinking about dumping the swim lanes entirely and seeing how we like that. And jury's still out on that, I guess. More reusable forms. Initially, I was kind of reluctant to use those reusable forms for reasons that make no sense to me now, really. Right? So when you're trying to do an edit on a reusable form, all of the data fields that need to be included in that edit need to be on the form, right? Even if you don't need it in that form per se, right? So it seemed, sort of arcane to me to have to drag something onto the form just for the sake of editing and hide it and stuff. And now it's like, why was I concerned about that? That was 20 seconds worth of work to drag something on and put it someplace and hide it, and that silly of me. So I've spent a lot of time after deployment moving things into reusable forms so that I only had to change things once. I'd make more use of that going forward. Vocabulary is another example. So I had a lot of data elements, like for email addresses of people who are receiving various notifications along the lines. I built that as a data element, and I put the default value as their email address, which worked, but it kind of causes issues when we're trying to go from development to prod. And vocabulary is a much better way to go with that. Then the other one that ended up burning us was we assigned things based on area. So when you're building a user, you can give them an area. So we had an area of contracts, an area of enablement, an area of tech support, and assigned the performers based on that area. That was cool, worked fine, until we got to process number 2. Now we had different areas assigned, and the same user might be involved in multiple processes. Bizagi only allows you to assign a single area to a user, so we ended up having to build duplicate user IDs for some of our users so that they could have the area they needed for the API enablement process and the area they needed over here. So we've changed that all out, and now we assign things by skills instead, because you can have multiple skills for a user. So those are some of my lessons learned and things I would do differently if I were to start over. What are our future plans? Well, we are trying to dramatically expand our use of Bizagi and put a lot more processes in there. We currently only have 3, and we really need to be making a lot more use out of that. So we've got 3 more that we're deploying in November, a couple of more in December. Hopefully we'll kind of keep that pace up over the course of the next year or 2, and maybe even expand that as we go forward. And we're trying to increase the use of Bizagi as an orchestration tool also to orchestrate things between legacy systems. We don't do a lot of that today. We certainly see the value of doing that. We have a new RPA tool. We just brought on UiPath a few months ago, so we'll be working on integrating that also. I've had a couple of joint teams between our UiPath team and a couple joint meetings between our UiPath team and our Bizagi team to make sure that we're tightly integrated there. And then, I got to get back up to the strategy level, right, and be strategically identifying other candidate processes to bring into Bizagi so that I can, maximally move the needle for our customers, for our shareholders, and for the company overall. So that's kind of my story and what we've been talking about. Any questions or comments that you might have at this point?
Really good presentation, thank you. So yesterday there was a sports apparel manufacturer who was not named.
Yes.
Although some of their slides had pictures of shoes with 3 stripes, but.
Gosh, I wonder who you could be talking about.
I can't figure it out. They presented an interesting governance model between the use of RPA and the use of more traditional process automation technologies. As you go forward with the UiPath team, is that something you intend to do at Travelport as well, to vet the processes in advance to find the right technology?
I'm not sure I follow. So we would use UiPath to do what?
Well, you were presented with a process automation opportunity from the business. And you have RPA technology and you have more traditional digital process automation technology through Bizagi. And sometimes there's a gray area between which technology stack you would use to automate that. Would Travelport look at a governance model in advance to say, if it's these characteristics, we'll go RPA, if it's these characteristics, we'll go GenAI?
Yes, we need to get there, and we realize we need to get there.
Okay.
We're still beginners. So yes, I'm spending some time at the UiPath booth to help understand some of that.
Great.
Exactly. So yeah, we need to do that. We also have we have ServiceNow is an ITSM tool we have in that has some workflow capabilities also. So I've been asking people about how they draw the line between what goes in Bizagi and what goes in ServiceNow too. And if some of you fall into that category, I'd love to talk with you about that. Okay. So great question. I wish I had an answer.
Okay. I'm with Forrester Research, by the way, and I don't have an answer, but I'd love to talk to you about it further.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Should one right here.
Hi, I was wondering if you use Bizagi on-prem or in the cloud, and if you use it in the cloud, do you work with the users on the model so that both you and them are working on it and making changes to it?
So currently we are on-prem, but we are deploying production and test environments to Bizagi's cloud in November. So we'll be doing that, but we're keeping the development server on our prem. But it's a server, it's not on somebody's PC. So we have a server and we can access it from wherever in the company to do that. So from a development perspective, I mentioned the 4 additional people, 2 of them are actually in London, not too far from the Bizagi headquarters, actually. So yeah, they can work off the same server and we can update the processes as needed. But yeah, right now we're on-prem, moving to cloud for test and production environments, not development.
You mentioned that you need to take care of the database, right? The data structures. So what's your plans to continue to take care of the data structures in Bizagi moving forward?
So the good news is a couple of those 4 people that are helping me now are more technical than I am. So I think they might be able to help me keep the more complicated data structures in a little better shape than I did. But yeah, I don't know. I've thought about whether it's worth it to try to remodel the existing 431 or not, and I'm thinking probably not. Our rate of change is just not that high anymore. We've had the process out there for a couple of years, and yeah, we're still tweaking things and we add things, but it's probably not worth restructuring that one per se. But yeah, going forward, as I say, I will try to be more careful, and I have some resources on the team now that can help me be more careful. Great questions. What else?
Thank you. Along the same line of what the gentleman asked there, the 430 data model, do you notice any significant lag when accessing the database because of that process, because of that huge table?
Yeah, Studio in general runs slower on that process than it does on our smaller processes. Not so much the data model, maybe a tad bit. The one that when you're going in to build your expressions or your the routing rules or the actions, the activity actions, those pages definitely run slower on the big process than they do the small one, but not so much on the data model.
Okay, because I have the same problem.
Okay. Other questions? All right. Well, we have about 2 minutes to spare, which means you can go get in line for food. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it.